Do you want to feel really old? Because potentially the best player in the world right now was 11 years old when Valorant came out. And of course, I'm talking about Fireflux's superstar duelist Kachao, who has made an absolute mockery of Tier 1 Valorant in EMEA playoffs and play ins. But Kachao's rise to superstardom in Valorant in Stage 2 doesn't appear to be an exception. It's not an outlier. This seems to be more of the rule of this year in 2026. And let's just look back in history at Xros joining Nongshim as a rookie and helping to lead them to a title at Masters Santiago. And then we can look a little bit more forward to the likes of Neon and Blows joining Leviathan and their title at Masters London. And in Stage 2, this pattern of young up-and-coming superstars has been accelerated by the Tier 2 teams not having an age cap and allowing super young 16, 17-year-old players to show what they have in play-ins and playoffs of Stage 2. And I think that this is not an exception. I think that this is where Valorant is going. And I want to talk a little bit more about that and the vision for the future. But first, a quick word from the sponsor of this video, Sony, and Sony's INZONE line of gaming and esports related peripherals. Sony has been a great sponsor of this channel. They sent me their entire line of products, from the monitor to the mouse pad to the headset to the keyboard, and I've been using all of them and loving every single piece of the equipment. All of it is well crafted. All of it is made with esports and gaming in mind, with a partnership and sort of advisory council from Fnatic helping to design things. And honestly, the products are great. It's what Sony is known for: build quality, aesthetics, ease of use. And if you want to find out more about their products, you should check out the link in the description and pinned comment below. So let's move back to Kachao first and foremost. I made this tweet after watching him play the other day and helping Fireflux qualify for the top 4, and I mean, maybe even helping them qualify for champions potentially, which is just an unbelievable story. His stats are just unbelievable. They're otherworldly. He's playing 2 agents that generally don't do that much damage. If you're like a huge stats nerd like me, you'll know that sort of the average damage for a really good Neon tends to be kind of in like the 140 to 150 range. And for a Yoru who's maybe opping quite a bit, it's going to be around 155 to 160. And Kachao's numbers, his damage numbers, are just unbelievable. Now, granted, this is an EMEA, shots fired, but not really, because, I mean, this is a kid playing against people who have been playing at the highest level of the game for basically half of, or a third of his life, and he is just making them look like peasants. He's making them look like average players. And it really is just sort of helping to coalesce, I think, an idea that I have been thinking about a lot this year as I've watched professional Valorant, because there was a lot of discussion coming into 2026 about, this game is going to be sort of ruined by the nerfs to initiators and sentinels, and it's going to be accelerated by just double duelist meta, and the way that you play Valorant is being simplified, and there's less and less sort of strategy and tech shooter fundamentals being focused on, and you just kind of run around and shoot. And I think that some of that is true, but I think that the way that we're talking about that sort of evolution of the game is actually pointing to the wrong things. Now, obviously, the nerfs and buffs to the different roles had some accelerationary effects, but I do think that there's a much deeper pattern that is causing Valorant to go in the direction that it's going. And I think that we are sort of now witnessing a shift in what Valorant is going to be going into the future. Because if you look at the beginning of this game, we had the likes of basically, when the game came out, there was just a free-for-all of sign as many Counter-Strike players as you can, right? We had, basically anybody who played Counter-Strike was getting a contract in tier 1. And over time, a lot of those players have kind of phased out as they got older and maybe got tired of the game or got surpassed by younger players. And now we have this new generation of players like the Kazis for Enterprise, like Siesta, who is, I think he's still 15, maybe, maybe he's 16 now, for on-site gaming. Kachow, of course. We had Gemalino for Eintracht Frankfurt. And just, the entire Leviathan team is super young. The entire Nongshim team is super young. It's just a young person's game now. And I think that this is really sort of like that shift from being the players who converted from other games to now just native Valorant players, right? There's a lot of these players who were 10 or 11 or 12 when Valorant came out, and they are now becoming of age to play in the league, and they've been doing nothing but grinding Valorant since the beginning. And I've been a little bit more exposed to this recently because I have been scrimming in North America. I put together a little scout team called Boss Baby, and we were playing in a bunch of these Mr. Funhaver tournaments. And you can see maybe some names that you recognize, Icy and Nerve, but these kids are kids. These guys are 15 and 16 years old. And I'm telling you right now that probably all three of these guys will be in the league in a couple of years. This guy in particular, as a duelist player, I mean, you can see these numbers are pretty unbelievable. And it's really sort of changed my perception of what Valorant is. Because I think one of my biggest mistakes last year as a head coach was not really fully understanding what the game is. And what I mean by that is, we've been told from the beginning that this is like Counter-Strike with abilities. This is a game that is very much a tac shooter with tac shooter fundamentals, and you need to be thinking about the game in those sort of guidelines and that sort of sandbox. But I think the more that I watched this game and the more that I've been involved and scrimmed and worked with different types of people and different types of players, and especially this year, I think this shift has happened where I don't really think that Valorant is necessarily a tactical shooter anymore. I think it is a tac shooter in a lot of ways, but I think it's sort of like a hybrid of an arcade shooter or a hero arcade shooter with tactical shooter sort of framework. And what I mean by that is this is a game where the limit testing that you see from these young players, the likes of a Sato, the likes of a Neon, Spike, the young guys that I was highlighting from EMEA, you're rewarded for being fearless. You're rewarded for being crazy. You're rewarded for taking chances and sort of pushing the limits of what is acceptable to do, because a lot of these characters enable you to do that. Think about Danby at the beginning. Think about Danby's Neon and Spike's Neon. Just completely changing the game and the perception of how this game works through movement and through, just sheer mechanical prowess and what you can get away with. And I think that this shift has always kind of been there, right? The movement characters have always been broken, right? Whether it's Jet or Yoru or even Omen, anybody that can move and teleport seems to be always powerful, basically. And so I think that hint has always been there. But then on top of that, you have just all these other abilities that introduce sort of all sorts of random and weird scenarios that people have to adapt to. Whereas on Counter-Strike, you have 3 pieces of utility. You've got, frag grenades, you've got smoke grenades, and you've got flashbangs. Every character has the same abilities, and every interaction with those is essentially unchanging. And so you get very used to that sort of pattern recognition. Okay, a flash is coming, it's going to flash me for this long. Okay, it bounces exactly like this. You just have to turn or whatever. Whereas in Valorant, even just looking at the flash category, there's like 10 types of flashes, you know? Sky Flash does a certain thing, Phoenix Flash does a certain thing, and blinds faster and longer. And, you know, like the amount of different variables in this game makes it so much different than a game like Counter-Strike. And I think that sort of leads me to one of my main points, which is that it's a game that you have to grind. I think this has become very clear to me. You have to grind this game if you want to be good at it. And this is something that I feel fairly confident on speaking on, because coming from the Dota world where there's, you know, 160 different heroes, if you don't grind that game, you will never be good at it, because you have to learn all those interactions. You have to learn how everything works, how all the different pieces fit together, how to react to, you know, what is 160 times 6 or times 5 abilities. It's like just an unbelievable amount of different interactions that can happen that you can only learn through experience of seeing them over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And I think that Valorant is very similar to that. And I think that that is why grinding is really, really important, because even if you only play like 3 agents, you're still going to be encountering all the other agents over and over and over. And you're going to see all these different patterns. You're going to see all these different actions. And so the grind is really important. And young players are much more likely to grind the game than older players, simply because they have more time, because it's easier to get fixated on a game when you're younger. I feel like you have less distractions in your life. You just want to be really good at the game. And also, you know, the physical side of things. When you're young, you can just play video games for like 14 hours a day and it's not going to affect you. Whereas if when you're in your 20s or something like that, back pain happens, you get tired, your eyes get tired, like all these things start to kind of pile up. And so it really does feel to me like Valorant is becoming a truly young person's game. And because the game is really based on grinding now, in my opinion, and I mean, it always has been kind of a grind centric game. I think the teams that play the most tend to be the best in a lot of cases. But you also have to understand that a lot of these players that are coming up now, you know, like the Dambies, like the Siestas, like the Boss Baby players, like these guys are playing like 400 games per act. And they're learning the game through a ranked environment, which is very particular in how it is played. And here's a bunch of pick rates globally for ranked. This is like Radiant ranked pick rates. I don't totally understand like the pick. This must be non-mirror or something like that. I don't really know. But if you look at every single one of these trackers of like ranked pick rates, you'll notice a couple things. We've got Clove, basically ubiquitous, the most picked agent by far. Jet, Chamber, Reyna. Okay, there's a Sova. We've got one support agent, Neon Phoenix, right? Every single one of these trackers, it's the same thing. Clove, Jet, Neon, Reyna, Chamber. Okay, we've got a Sova in there because everybody understands that wall hacking is really powerful. But every other agent basically is just a duelist, self-sufficient, mechanical, rewarding agent. And so all of these players are learning the game in this context. They are learning the game by playing 250 games of Clove per act, because they don't want to play smokes, but they know that they need smokes. But Clove is just a duelist that has the ability to smoke, right? And you just see this over and over and over. You look at all the top players on the leaderboard. It's Jet, Reyna, Chamber, maybe a Neon, or, you know, sort of like a specialized duelist agent, like a Yoru sometimes, or a Raze, ISO potentially. Then their second most, or oftentimes their most played agent will be Clove, and then the duelist will be second. And this is like every top 100 player in every region. So all they are doing is training their mechanics and their micro fighting and their sort of like limit testing, because all of these agents, that is all they do. They just are mechanical agents. And so there's like very little development of good utility, but holy shit, these guys can fight. They can shoot, they can find timings, they can fight together a lot of the time. The micro is incredible. The macro, not so much. The utility, certainly not. The agent pool, not so much. But oh my God, these guys are insane at shooting and game sense and all of the micro stuff. And that is what we're seeing now. And we're in a meta that rewards the micro. So I'm not surprised to see so many young micro focused players having so much impact in the game, because they simply are rewarded for that, right? They are rewarded for that. The game rewards you for that. And I think that this is why we're seeing some of these more macro focused teams and players like the Heretics and the Fanatics, and honestly even the G2s. I know G2 are still in the hunt and probably will go to champs, but they don't look nearly as dominant as they have in previous years, because I think it's just a different game now. I think that yes, trading and spacing and all these tack shooter things do matter, but what matters more than anything else is your ability to just push your own limits and play with confidence. And that's what all these young kids are doing. And so that sort of like training ground of just Clove, Jet, Reyna, Chamber, okay, Sova, right? That is what is coming. That's what's coming. And that is what is sort of replacing the previous generation of players. So with all that being said, I just really think that that is probably where the game is going. Like, I'm going to be honest, from scrimming with this team and playing these Mr. Funhavers, that's just what you see. Like, that's all you see. I would force this team to play some Omen and some other stuff, and the skill translates. It certainly translates, and if you give them sort of just like some basic sort of like guidelines to play within as far as the macro stuff goes, and the comp stuff goes, they can execute it with insane ability, because they are all free to sort of like flow state mechanical prowess play the game, as long as they're relatively comfortable on their agents. And so it's not that you can't take what is coming talent wise and turn it into like true tier 1 players, but I think everybody kind of needs to shift their mentality about like what the talent development pipeline looks like, because this is something I definitely didn't understand last year. I thought that, okay, this is a tack shooter game, so the strategy really matters, the comps matter, like, and it does matter, but it matters a lot less than you think it does if you can't win the micro. And if you can't win the micro and you don't focus enough on the micro, you'll just never be a top team at this point, I think. And so, yeah, I mean, my perception of the game has changed. I think that's where we're going. I think that we're just going to continue to see, every year it's going to be the 17, the 18, the 19-year-olds that are just absolutely leagues better than the players that have been playing for a long time, except for a few sort of, rare exceptions. And those older, more experienced players will definitely find their place, because you do need a balance, right? I think probably the best balance is something like a Lev, where you have, very, very experienced IGL who gets the respect of these players, very experienced, well organized coaching staff, and then just some absolute demons surrounding that. So whether it's like a 1-4 or like a 2-3, you need some experience to kind of lead the way and help them develop as teammates and as communicators and as professionals. But you definitely want to be indexing in just raw ability for sure. And so I really do think that going forward, the ability of coaches to develop players into those tier 1 professionals from the raw ranked standpoint is going to be a huge kind of telling factor on who is good. And then obviously, like I said, there will be some outliers, like Energy. This is a team that maybe bucks the trend a little bit. just because they do have a lot of experience, but they also have a lot of very sort of young players. And last year, obviously, they won champions with, you know, what, 3 people coming in from tier 2. Not that these guys hadn't been grinding the game for a while, but they were in tier 2, made the jump to tier 1, instantly won champions. It's just kind of crazy. Like the talent development wave, like every year, it's just going to be the new players, the hungrier players, the guys that are grinding the most, I think are going to continue to kind of like unseat the players that have been kind of languishing in tier 1 for a while. Okay, and this is a good transition point into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Trust me, we will get to Pacific playoff pick'ems and America's playoff pick'ems, and we'll talk about EMEA and China a little bit. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about news wise that I think is pretty interesting is just the amount of turnarounds that we've had this year. With, you know, Furia goes 0-5 and then makes playoffs. We had Gen G, terrible, and then they come back in stage 2 and they're 5-0. They make playoffs. Nongshim was great at the beginning of the year, then terrible, and then all of a sudden they seem back. And then Veryl was terrible at the beginning of the year, and now they're back. And DRX was terrible, and now they're back. And in EMEA, we had, you know, KC was terrible, and now they might be the best team in the region. And it's just the amount of these sort of quick turnarounds that we've seen. China with JDG being very average and then really quite poor in stage 2, and now they're making champions by making it into the grand finals. These turnarounds are really, really interesting, and I think a lot of them sort of come down to a couple of factors. First of all, usually there's a little bit of roster moves, and then there's a sort of like everybody locks into one idea, and it tends to be very comfort based, very simple. I wouldn't say that any of these teams that had this big turnaround were doing anything super unique or particularly complicated with the game, but most of them kind of leaned into a bit more ranked comfort style where they just simplify their game, they simplify their comps, they simplify their decisions, and they just lean into utilizing their firepower and their, you know, micro play, teamwork, team fighting type of stuff. And I think that's, again, just this is what Valorant is now. And every single one of these teams that has had sort of that big glow up and that big turnaround, you see, you know, Chamber, you see Phoenix, you see Yoru, you see Neon, just, you know, the limit testing agents, the micro fighting agents are very prevalent in what they're playing. And I mean, it's been exciting. There's been some very interesting storylines, and there will be some very interesting storylines going forward into the playoffs. But I think it all kind of comes full circle to just like this shift over the last year or so into what Valorant is going to be going forward into 2027 and the future of this game. And, you know, the shift to this more open circuit, I think, is just going to sort of accelerate that a little bit, because it's going to allow so many more young players to play, right? The age is dropping down to 17, and you're just going to see a lot more sort of ranked crazy players. And honestly, rankers was sort of like the harbinger of this entire thing, right? It's just a bunch of ranked players that made their run, qualified, and then obviously it was too young to play in BCT, but they showed sort of the path, right? Because they played very different than basically everybody else, where they were just flowing every game. Every game was just, all right, what are these crazy kids gonna do? And yes, there was some structure around it, and there were some set plays and stuff like that, but it was just kind of, it was the flow of every single person on this team has played 400 games every act for the last 2.5 years or whatever, and so they're just mechanically better. They're just game sense better. They make decisions faster. They do crazier things because they know they can get away with it. And I mean, it's kind of cool to see. Like, I think the game is fun to watch in that way. I know that some tac shooter purists are maybe on the fence about it, but I think it's fun. As long as you kind of understand what's happening, I think that there's definitely ways to appreciate that new sort of direction that the game seems to be going in. Um, okay. All that being said, let's go ahead and dive into Pacific. The play-ins, the playoffs. A few just quick thoughts about the play-ins. Um, Obviously, we had Full Sense bombing out. Unlucky. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. They looked pretty bad in stage 2. They never really seemed to figure it out. Cruz retiring. Obviously, he's been a legend in the high scene, in the Pacific scene. Kind of sad to see that happen. It did seem like he was just burned out by the end of the season. Really just kind of a whimper. This team went out with a bit of a whimper. I think they really just did not ever play with enough discipline to win games. And it's kind of a weird thing after just talking about how you need to play in kind of like flow state and just like micro and all that stuff. But I think that if you're trying to play a system that is more structured, but the players don't have the capability to do that, you're going to find friction there. And I would assume, based on how Frost coaches and has coached in the past, that he's trying to get them to play in the system. And these are, again, I mean, Full Sense is very much kind of that young ranked team. And you could see it. They would just make a lot of really bad decisions when they were up numbers or in man advantage, in retakes, in post plants. It kind of seemed like there was always a little bit of this dissonance in like how they instinctively wanted to play situations and how they were trying to play situations. And I think that is something that you see a lot when you have coaches trying to put too much structure on players that are just not ready for that structure. And I would say that I have experienced this myself with, potentially with GE last year. And just in general, like I think a lot of coaches tend to feel like they need to like outbrain the game. But in reality, there's only so much that you can do because you're not in control in the game, right? And so you need to sort of balance how much structure and how many ideas and how much sort of macro and comp stuff you can really implement while also trying to enable your players to just play the game. Because at the end of the day, if they're thinking too much while they're trying to play, they're just never going to play as well as the players that are just like instant decision making, right? And so that balance is something that's very hard to strike. And I think, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Full Sense got it wrong. But I don't know the inner workings of the team, so I don't really know how on base I am with that. That being said, the rest of the play-ins, KRX makes a comeback. I would say that their bracket was fairly easy once they figured out what they wanted to play. Nongshim beating T1 decisively. Yoru Neon is back. Francis on Yoru. I've been begging for them to do this all season. I think Francis's operator is like one of the most important things for this team's success. And him not playing the Yoru op was killing me. Onsite Gaming kind of shook off their nerves. And honestly, their path was difficult, but not too bad. I don't have super high hopes for them in the playoffs, but it is exciting to see another tier 2 team making it into playoffs. And then T1 bounced back, beat DFM. I feel like there was definitely a bit of a tier gap at the end of the day, in terms of like where the teams ended up in Pacific. I think we've got, PaperX at the top by far, and then we've got Nongshim, T1, GE. We'll see what Viral and Genji look like, but there definitely seemed to be a bit of a drop off Obviously, DFM had some moments of brilliance. Zeta had some moments where they looked pretty good this year, but ultimately there's a pretty big fall off between, the bottom of the top pack and then the rest of the league. So going into playoffs, let's just go ahead and do our pick 'em. We got some crazy games. I'm gonna try and stream at least the GE game tonight, I think, and then maybe watch the VOD of Paper X Nongshim since it starts at like 1 a.m. my time. But Paper X Nongshim is just, I mean, it's a crazy matchup for upper round one. Man, I think as good as Nongshim looks, and I really want Nongshim to go to champs, I feel like Paper X with enough prep is going to be able to beat them. I think probably these are the two best teams in the league in Pacific. But I think Paper X is going to win this one. And it's really just kind of going off like, yes, Nongshim looks great. Yes, they've sort of found their identity again. But Paper X has just been waiting for them. They've been watching them. And Nongshim has essentially just gone back to what they did at the beginning of the year, which Paper X had also been watching and learned against. And they played each other in the grand finals of Santiago. So Paper X knows what Nongshim is going to do, how they're going to do it. And Nongshim is doing it with slightly worse agents than they were at the beginning of the year. So I would be surprised if Paper X lost. Honestly, even though I do think Nongshim is really, really good. So Paper X goes through. GE against KRX. This is another really interesting one because in my head, I feel like GE is probably the third or fourth best team in Pacific. Like I'm picking them to go to champions. I think they're definitely like right up there. But I'm a little bit worried for them in this KRX matchup just because I feel like KRX sometimes, if they turn it on, they just become more skilled than most teams. And the firepower on GE is good, but if Fring and Hyunmin and Mako are all on, it's a little scary. It's definitely a little scary. I think that being said, I'm going to pick GE to win this because I do, again, kind of believe in like the prep advantage. I still have some questions about KRX in terms of their consistency. Although it does seem like they are starting to kind of hit their stride. But I think that GE will be able to handle it just because KRX doesn't necessarily have quite the same level as they've had in previous years. But I think they are kind of getting close. And I wouldn't be surprised if they beat GE here. Okay. Upper semifinals, Gen G against Paper X. I think Paper X will just win this. I know that Gen G went 5-0. I know that they have looked really, really good since moving Charon back to Smokes, Texture to Chamber a bunch, Ash to Neon. But I just don't believe. I just don't believe that they're actually like the best team in the region. I think Paper X is probably the best team in the region, and I think Paper X will prove that. Hey, Varel against GE. This is another really interesting one because, I mean, what is the ceiling for Varel? I've just done like what 25 minutes talking about how the young up and coming kids are the truth and the future of this game, and that's basically Varel in a nutshell. Will they outskill GE? I mean, I've been kind of on the train that Varel's maybe a little bit too undisciplined, a little bit too crazy. I feel like maybe GE should be able to out-discipline, outlast them, but also GE is definitely one of those teams that will get pulled into a brawl. And I don't know if you want to be pulled into a brawl against Varel. I'm kind of talking myself into Varel winning this one. But I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. Curious. A little worried for GE, actually. Maybe I'm going to pick Viral here. I've been a little bit on the fence with Viral. Like, sometimes they look incredible. Sometimes I think they're not that good. I kind of want to see GE against PaperX in the upper final just so we get Patman against PaperX again. I think I'm going to pick GE here. I think I'm just not quite a believer in Viral. Yeah, we'll just do that. Okay, Nongshim will beat Onside. I don't think I really need to explain this. They're just a much better team than Onside is. KRX against T1. Ooh, boy. What are the points in Pacific? What are the points in Pacific? Right now, Nongshim is in the lead. So T1 needs to get to third or fourth place, which is here, to qualify on points. Or they need Nongshim and PaperX to both make grand finals. So this would be dangerous. This would be pretty dangerous. I think T1 will beat KRX. I think they will beat KRX. I'm not a huge believer in KRX. So I think T1 will win that. And then we get Munchkin against Gen G for an elimination. Both teams really need to win this. Oh boy, that is spicy. On the other side of thing, Viral against Nongshim. I think Nongshim would just out-brawl Viral. As good as Viral can be in those chaotic situations, I think Nongshim would win that. Gen G against T1. Oh my goodness. There's so many extra variables in there with Munchkin against his former team. Although he's not calling at this point. So maybe I just pick T1 to go through. I mean, this would be my top 4 that I picked to go to champions, and this would be sort of the culmination of that. That feels a little bit too easy. Like, is this really gonna happen? But sure, let's make it happen. So upper final, I think I would just pick PaperX over GE. I think I would pick Nongshim to beat T1 here. And then I think I'm just going to end with Nongshim against PaperX in the grands and PaperX winning the grand finals. Now, the reasoning behind this is really kind of vibes based at this point. You know, we'll probably be super wrong. But I do just kind of feel like PaperX is probably the best team. Nongshim is very close. GE is very good. And T1 is solid. And that sort of leads me to 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go ahead and just lock that in. Those are my Pacific pick'ems. Let's move on to Americas now. And quick little recap of the play-in stage here. MIBR kind of rounding into form. We had some crazy potential situation from Envy. They looked like they were maybe going to go on a run. At this point, I thought that they might even make it into playoffs and then do some damage in playoffs. Like, Envy is another one of those teams that kind of just went to like the ranked style, put everybody on the comfort stuff, put Knights on Phoenix, put Demon One on Chamber, you know, just play ranked with a little bit of structure, and it was working pretty well. Steamrolled M80, steamrolled Sentinels, almost beat MIBR. It was a fun little run. And then on the other side of things, we had Furia essentially doing the same thing. You know, basic to Phoenix, Koala into Neon, just playing the Lev stuff, beating 2G, not that surprising. Beating G2 was huge, and this is sort of where I think the biggest storyline is for me. As fun as it is to see, you know, the likes of Furia and EG making playoffs and MIBR, you know, Ospas, will he sneak his way into another champions? Maybe. For me, G2 is really kind of the story to watch as we go into playoffs, because I am kind of worried for this team. Obviously, they start in lower round 1. And as far as points goes, I mean, they're not safe either. They are number 2 in points, but NRG is 1 point behind them. And there's definitely a world where Lev and Energy end up as like the number 1 and 2 points, and G2 falls below that. But I think that might require some sort of unique circumstances. Realistically, G2 probably makes it in on points. I don't think they're going to make it all the way through to grand finals, to be honest. They have not been convincing to me. They've been good, they've been solid, but I think they are kind of lacking an X factor right now that some of these other teams have, like the Energies, who can just have Kiko drop 30, who can just have Brock go absolutely nuts, 100 Thieves, who have, Cryo and Timotino and Asuna going nuts, Lev, of course. I mean, even MIBR with Osbos and Zekin. I feel like there's just like a little bit of extra firepower and sort of like another gear that some of these teams can go to that I just don't really feel like G2 can go to at the moment. It's not like they're playing poorly. And if we look at stats, right, you do have actually I guess you don't really have anybody from G2 that high. The highest rated player is Trent and then Baby Bay. And yeah, I guess that kind of sounds about right to me, where you've got like the initiator and the sentinel player playing at the highest level in terms of impact, according to the VLR rating. Whereas a lot of these other teams, you've got like the duelist player, you've got the two duelist players, or you've got the two duelist players and the sentinel player. It feels like we're getting a little bit more impact out of some of these teams from those roles. And to me, that just feels like G2 is, they're going to be fine, but they're not going to be world beaters at the moment. Maybe that will change. Leaf has looked a bit better since playing like the Yoru and that type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit worried for G2. Okay, let's talk about the pick'ems here. Loud against Furia. I mean, this is a pretty interesting matchup actually, because Furia definitely looks revitalized, and Loud is sort of the quintessential, young ranked team, right? Their IGL I think is 18. Erde is 18, I believe. Luke Show was the phenom last year. They've got young, high firepower players, and they play kind of just like a little ranked. Tika's in, coming in, playing that sort of young firepower duelist. Darker is a rookie this year as well, right? Yeah, he is a rookie this year. And I mean, it's just another one of these young teams that is hungry, that has the firepower. But so is Furia. I think I'm going to go with Loud here. I'm kind of just picking all the teams that have a little bit more time to prep, I know, but I'm just thinking about firepower wise. I think I would, as good as basic has been for Furia, I think Loud just shoots a little harder. I think they just shoot a little harder than Furia, and I'm kind of just going off of firepower for the most part in these games. Lev MIBR is a very interesting one, just because you've got like the old guard, the Zekin and the Oswas against the new guard, the Sato, the Neon, the Spike. I think I'm gonna go Lev here. I think they're just a bit of a better team overall. Not that MIBR is bad by any means, but Lev is just scary good. And so I feel like those two, this one I'm a little bit less confident in. Energy Loud is definitely an interesting one, but I think Energy is sort of the exception to the rule. I think they're just a little bit too good. They're a little bit too experienced. They've kind of been like the team. What's the best way to put this? They're like the team. They're like that one hero in the zombie movie that's like standing against the horde of zombies running at them, where they're like, we are gonna guard this town of the old way against the horde of zombies running me down. And I feel like they've kind of been the most successful team at combating this new wave of players, and I think that will continue here. They have a lot of unique ideas. I think they're kind of leaning into the fact that they're a bit unique in what they're doing. That is definitely throwing some of these younger teams for a loop. I think their ability to come out with some new ideas, like obviously the Brimstone comp on Summit is weird, but works. They've been a pretty good Abyss team in the past, I think, from what I remember. I wouldn't be surprised to see them be a good Abyss team, at least coming into this next phase. Yeah, I just think that they're sort of one of the teams that like can maybe hold back the tide of the young, micro players, at least for a little bit longer. And then 100 Thieves Lev is a really interesting one as well, just because like they both kind of play similar, but a little different. But definitely fairly similar in that they heavy rely on the Phoenix. They heavy rely on like the dive duelist plus Phoenix combo, plus the opping Sentinel in a lot of cases. Um, really, really interesting matchup. I kind of want to pick 100 Thieves, but I also feel like Lev's pressure is maybe just too high. So I'm going to pick Lev here. Then down in lower round 1, I mean, Furia just beat G2. I don't think G2 will lose to Furia twice. I think they will beat them. I just don't think that Furia has quite enough gas to get there in the playoffs. So G2 will go play 100 Thieves. And then MIBR against EG. Ooh, it's kind of a fun one, honestly. But I think I'm gonna go with MIBR just being a little bit better than Evil Geniuses in terms of their individuals. But I think this is actually pretty close. I think this is a pretty close one. If Verno can keep up the form that he's in right now, which has just been kind of otherworldly in terms of his clutch, in terms of just like his playmaking, I think MIBR wins this fairly easily. But it could definitely be a grinder. I could see this one be a bit of a grinder. 3 maps, a couple overtimes. I think this one will be a little bit closer than maybe people think. Okay, moving on to lower round 2, 100 Thieves against G2. What is the point situation? 100 Thieves needs to win this, right? Yeah, they need to win this to make champs, to guarantee, I believe, that they make champs. If they win this, they go to champs. I think if G2 gets to here, they make champs also, basically, unless Loud can somehow go on a run, or MIBR. I guess this game is kind of important as well. 100 Thieves against G2. I think 100 Thieves will win this. Like I said, I'm not super high on G2 right now. I think they're a bit of like a gatekeeper team, and I think 100 Thieves is probably a bit better than that. I would put 100 Thieves maybe like number 3 in Americas currently. And I think they should beat G2. Maybe like a 53-47 type of game. Loud MIBR is also a very interesting one. Have these teams played each other this season? Recently? Back in stage 1. Okay, so different team. Do we go with the experience or the young guys here? It's definitely interesting. I think I'm going to go with Loud here, actually. And we're going to have MIBR miss champs. I don't know. I just, something about this Loud team. They're definitely a bit hit and miss. Sometimes they look terrible. Sometimes they look insane. Sometimes Luke Show is just walking everybody down. I think I'm going to go Loud here. Okay. Energy Lev. Again, I think Energy is just that team. They kind of can handle these young guns at the moment. This really could go either way. Total 50-50, my opinion. And then I think 100 Thieves will beat Loud here. Beat the rematch. I think Lev probably wins the rematch again. And then we're going to go, I don't know, just kind of guessing here. We'll go Lev on just the comeback. Energy takes second place. We get 100 Thieves, Lev, Energy, and G2, I believe. Yeah, G2 would be the champs teams. That's what I predicted as well. Go ahead and save that. And quickly talk about EMEA. EMEA, I mean, we talked about EMEA quite a bit already with the young players and the crazy surprises. I think I'll just freely admit, I think I've been underrating Karmine Corp pretty much this entire stage. I wasn't a total believer. They did make it into the upper final by beating a tier 2 team, but it is a tier 2 team that had just beaten Vitality and has looked quite good. I think that just the way that they're playing the game right now it's very much kind of in this vein of just like everybody is just doing their comfort stuff, right? You've got Dacia on Omen exclusively, where he can just play like a total freak. We got Levin just playing Neon every map. Levin was a player that I was pretty sure was out of tier 1 after watching him play earlier this year, but I think they've kind of revitalized him by just giving him one thing to do, which is just to play Neon, just shoot your gun, play Neon, run around. Um, he was not good, flexing all over the place. His Yoru was really poor. His Raze was not good, but the Jet was always fine, and then the Neon has been good as well. So I think they've kind of found their footing with Levin, and that has definitely allowed their team to really kind of level up because they've got that tip of the spear, then they've got the firepower around that. Narrate has been great on the chamber. I mean, 18 and 4 openers is nuts. Super, super high conversion rate on the first bloods. He's been opping a ton. It's been really consistent. And then Aves is an interesting one. He's a player, and I think this is another thing that we're kind of seeing this year a lot, which is that your IGL needs to be able to shoot. And Aves is he's like a flex duelist player, kind of. Ray's most played. We saw him on the Phoenix, which was whatever. But Jet, this is a guy who plays to frag. And he's on the Sova and the Fade and doing a decent job. I still think he might be a little bit of a weak link for this team in terms of feeding his life away a bit too often, but they do have a ton of firepower and they're playing to comfort. So they've been significantly better than I thought they were. And are they the best team in the region? I don't know. I kind of still think that Foot is going to win, but I definitely could also see Karmine Corp win. Now, on the bottom side of the bracket here, obviously we had Vitality getting eliminated by 2 tier 2 teams. Vitality is definitely a bit in trouble, I think. They're snaking their way into champs thanks to their earlier good stages, but they don't look great. They look like they are... I don't know. What's the best way to put it? They feel like a team that is kind of trying to force the meta too much, in my opinion. Like they're putting Yampy on the Yoru and the Phoenix and that type of stuff. And yeah, I don't really know with this team. Sayonara has mostly just transitioned into being full-time recon, with Yampy playing a lot more of the flash duelist, and I'm not entirely sure I like that. Chronicle has been solid. Durka has been solid, but he was pretty bad this playoffs, actually. I don't know. They're kind of an inconsistent team, which is, I guess, where they've been most of the year, to be honest. But their ceiling is still high, but I also just don't know. I think they would benefit from maybe taking a step back from the meta and just looking at what their players have always done the best and then trying to go towards that. Which, I mean, maybe they just don't know what that is, because I'm having a hard time kind of thinking of what does Sayonara and Yampy play in that scenario. I'm genuinely not sure. I think probably Yampy back to Initiator makes the most sense to me, but I don't know if they'll do that. Liquid's an interesting one also. They've been kind of up and down. I think Liquid is very close to being a super good team. The Fireflex matchup is crazy. Fireflex probably comes into this. I mean, they're going to be the underdog just because they're a tier 2 team, but I feel like a lot of people are maybe looking at this as them being the favorite, which I have a hard time disagreeing with. I mean, this team is so fun to watch. They're so fun to watch with Dead Ink, Batu, Kachao, Reezy, all of them. The way that they beat BBL at the end, with Reezy just teleporting in to Flood on a site hit that looked like it was going super well and then just killing everybody. Crazy end to this series. I think I'm probably still going to pick Liquid to win this and go to champs, but either one could win this. I think maybe after champs I will do sort of post-mortem for a lot of these teams, maybe region by region, just talk about giving grades out to every single team, how they handled their season, the roster moves they made, the decisions they made. So we'll talk a little bit more about, Fnatic and whoever doesn't make it at that point. But let's quickly talk about China. The big thing, just want to highlight, Tyloo finally makes it international. Thank God. This team is insanely good. If you haven't watched any China at all, this is very much the team that is like the Lev or the Nongshim, where they've just got a bunch of really young, super high firepower players, and then a couple experienced, leaders like Sufat. And slowly he's not super experienced, but he's a little bit more experienced than some of the other players on this team. Slowly, insane MVP of the finals. Splash, like the number one prospect out of Indonesia. Scales and ERV, these guys are extremely good. Super young, super inexperienced, but also have been incredible this year. This team is very, very good. They're a little bit too scrappy, I think, at times, but their firepower is nuts. And then they beat JDG in the final, and JDG is a team that, was dead like a month ago. And then they brought in Berlin, got rid of Stu, which seems like a crazy move, but they desperately needed an IGL. So they brought in Berlin from FPX. Stu is now with EDG, and they made Jay the main duelist. He was playing sort of secondary duelist, while Stu and him were kind of like trading off duelist duties. And they made Jay like the op guy / neon player. Jay Kuro's been sort of like the secondary / main entry. Crown Fisher has been quite good, although in this series he got destroyed. But yeah, they've been a fun team. I think they're probably like kind of a scrappy, likely to go out in group stage team at Champions, but kind of a fun one. They play very different than a lot of the other Chinese teams. This is a team that's playing a lot more kind of like slow default mid-roundy, insert, send somebody over here, take a main. A lot more sort of mid-round focused, whereas Tyloo is just like balls to the wall. We're going to run at you and we're just going to shoot you in the face, which has worked out pretty well for a lot of teams this year. So that's China. That is the episode. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time. Peace out.